Hello everybody, good morning. I saw a lecture the other day, just a brief lecture. I just saw it pop up on YouTube, and it was about objects. And this was a person that likes to talk about objects. They have no credentials, no degrees in material culture. They couldn't tell you the meaning of the word object or material or culture. They all come from Latin. Ob is a preposition. Jacere is to hurl, so to hurl against something is object. Materia means, most people think it means material. It doesn't actually mean wood in Latin, but it can mean about 20 different things or different kinds of materials. And then culture, cultare, to cultivate, to worship, with again about 20-30 other meanings and various participles and common nouns that branch off of that one verb. So this person has no authority. They have no experience as an archaeologist, or they have no degrees, but they like to talk about objects, even though they don't actually know anything about objects, because these people, they like to talk. They don't read, they don't dig in the earth for archaeology. They talk, but they're not knowledgeable. They're kind of empty fountains or dry fountains. Anyway, so I studied material culture. I've studied, as you can see, for 15 years. I've been a professional archaeologist, and I hold 2 degrees in material culture studies and classical studies. That is ancient languages. You might say I'm a real-life Indiana Jones. And before I studied material culture, I was a musician for a very, very long time, and I've never been particularly interested in materialism. I've always been a deeply spiritual person, so I've had a number of religious experiences, and these have shaped my worldview. I don't really particularly value materialism like very many people do, because I come from a spiritual standpoint. That's where I believe in human kindness, in doing good in the world. I don't believe in taking everything and avarice and materialism. There's a beautiful quote by Moriya Yoshiba, the wonderful Japanese martial artist, in his Art of Peace, translated by John Stevens. It's always important to accredit the translator. You'll find that people that are not translators, that don't understand other languages, that don't understand Mandarin, Chinese, Japanese, they don't understand Latin, they don't understand ancient Greek, they don't understand French, they're not cultured, they're not sophisticated, they'll talk to Italians in English, and that is very disrespectful to Italians. When I was in Italy, they said, when in Italy you speak Italiano, and the same in Spain. In Spain you speak Spanish, in France you speak French, but these people, they always speak English, because they're disrespectful and they're ignorant, and they'll lecture you about people that write in Latin and Italian and tell you all about them, but they don't speak any Latin and they don't understand Italian. Anyway, there's a beautiful quote by John Stevens translating Moriya Yoshiba, the Japanese martial artist, and he says, the ideal economy blends the spiritual with the material, and the best commodities to trade in are honesty, sincerity, and love. And this is very true. Actually, it's best to trade in honesty and sincerity. So that means not being a charlatan and going on to YouTube and talking about objects and things, but actually coming from a standpoint of ignorance, and not leading people down the garden path and saying, oh, we'll give you a good job, and if you come with me, I'll give you this and I'll give you that, and I'll be there at your initiation, and I'll be there at your raising, and then just abandon the person when they've left their own family. Most of their friends have alienated them because of their association with this person, and you believe them to be virtuous and honourable. So listen to Moriya Yoshiba, translated by John Stevens, that the best commodities to trade in are honesty and sincerity, and most important of all, love. Elsewhere in the Art of Peace, John Stevens translates Moriya Yoshiba as saying there are many paths to the top of Mount Fiji, but there is only one summit, and that's love. I want to tell you a story. And I have a friend, he's a martial artist. He's a good martial artist. He's heavy duty, and his older brother is an artist. And I grew up with these guys. I know their family very well. Their father had a business with my father. And I bumped into him in town one day. I'm from Bridport, which is the nicest town in all of England, by the way. And he said, "Oh, my sensei has given up teaching." And I said, "Oh, that's terrible," because he was really benefiting from this guy. I said, "Why did he give up teaching martial arts?" He said, "He's found painting." And then I asked my sensei why he gave up beating people up, because that's what martial arts is. It's learning how to beat people up to cause harm. That's what it is. And he says that painting is a higher level, that actually he's on a higher spiritual level when he creates beautiful artworks, like making things like flowers and countryside pastoral scenes and painting beautiful people, that this creates joy and love and is closer to the spiritual realm than attacking people and learning how to beat them up, which is what martial artists do. Okay, so that's an important example. I mean, I have a number of books on martial arts. I mean, like this is on here. It's my favourite martial art. This is Aikido. Aikido. Now, I never practice Aikido because I don't want to have joints broken in my wrists. Okay, because if you practice Aikido, you get really bad joints very quickly in your wrists where you're constantly throwing people. And so I just read about it, so that if I did need to defend myself, I would know what to do. I'd have to practice a little bit, but I don't actively spend all day thinking, oh, what if I get attacked? What am I going to do? Or, how do I beat people up and stuff? As a matter of fact, Aikido doesn't actually have any. Aikido in its purest form, Ki Aikido, actually doesn't have any attacking moves. It's to turn your enemy into your friend. So it's like Qigong. A lot of bodyguards use this, and a lot of bouncers use it, because it dials the situation down without anybody getting hurt. You don't use a weapon in Aikido until you get to the very top level. So you're expert at taking weapons out of people's hands and saying, "Hey, let's talk about this. Let's use their own negative energy against them." And that's what I'm going to do today. We're going to talk about material culture. So, this is a little book I found the other day, and this is quite a nice book. It's a little book, as you can see. It's a history of the world in 100 objects, and it's a number of objects in the British Museum. They've been very carefully chosen in the right order, and that's beautiful. And it even contains recent objects like credit cards and solar panels and things, but it goes right the way back all throughout history and highlights a number of objects. So if you want to know about objects rather than just listening to people talking on YouTube about objects, this would be a good book to buy. This is a nice book. I picked it up for £3 in a charity shop, and it's a beautiful book. It's by Neil McGregor, and it's a history of the world in 100 objects. So that's one example. This is an excellent book on objects. This is an introduction to material culture. Now this book is part of a module which is otherwise known as a course at my alma mater, my university. And this gave us an introduction into material culture. Now there was a later course, a 251. This is a 151. Both of the courses are now obsolete. But this was it's making sense of things, an introduction to material culture. And in the first section of the first chapter, there's a discussion about the historiography of material culture. And the second section has a lovely case study on the Kula cycle of the Trio Brand Islanders. And these are indigenous peoples that exist in Micronesia and in Papua New Guinea and places. And there was a very important anthropologist, a guy called Branislaw Malinowski, who wrote a book in 1922 called Argonauts of the South Pacific. And this gave the basis, the scientific basis of anthropology. And it's how participant observation case studies are done and conducted today. Sorry, my dog's very ill. Romulus? No. Anyways, so this book has some really nice different approaches to material culture, and there are basically two approaches. If you want to know about objects, I mean really know about objects, not just listen to YouTube videos of people that don't actually know anything about objects trying to lecture you on things about material culture they have no qualifications or experience in. The two most usual common approaches today, and there are other approaches, are the object-driven approach and the object-centered approach. Now, the object-driven approach is pioneered by someone like, say, Janet Hoskins in her book Biographical Objects, and she distinguished between different kinds of approaches to constructing an object biography, and that is in the field of anthropology, which is you start by doing ethnographic research and you build the story of the object around ethnographic research. So that's things like Malinowski's participant object observation case studies, and you do it that way. Another way is the object-centered approach, which is much more common to archaeology and also history and art history, which is you start with the material culture itself and then you build a story around it using primary sources and extant historical texts, things like diaries, letters, historical works that are written at the time. Even a newspaper can be a primary source, even if it has bias and propaganda. It's still a source because it was on the spot, it was there at that time. Interestingly, in journalism, there's a very important premise, which is that every source has to be verified by two credible sources in order for it to go to print. So they can't just say, oh, Mr. So-and-so said that such and such did this, and get a bit of gossip and hearsay, anecdotal quote-unquote evidence, and then publish it. They have to be verified and vetted, fact-checked before they go to print, so that the story stands up, so that if someone were to investigate the story and say, oh, hang on, you printed this, they would find out that it's true. So that's an important distinction. So what is an object life cycle? What's an object life cycle? Well, a pictorial representation, I don't know if you can see it very well there, there's an object life cycle right there. And so what you have is it's like a three-stage process. You have the production of the object, so that's the creation of the artifact. You have its consumption, that's its use and its life. So it's kind of has a birth or a gestation period where it's being created. It's like it in the womb. It starts with an idea, then it's formed. Then it has a life, which is it's used. And then it has an afterlife. For example, say this. Now this is an object I just found the other day. I found this using my new pioneering technique called dangerous verge archaeology. And this I ran across the road. I found a muddy bank in the rain that all the cars had eroded, and this was just going to get washed down into the river and smashed up and broken, but I rescued it. This would have been lost. Now this has been in the ground probably 30,000 years. This has been in the ground. This is a Neolithic scraper. It has a beautiful dark red type of stone in it, which is very rare for these. My best objects are all locked away under lock and key. They're not in the vicinity. I don't put them on display because people would maybe steal them, and they're very precious. But this is still a nice one. It's not Premiership, but it's getting that second division, this one. It's a scraper. So anyway, this has had an afterlife. It had its birth, which is somebody, Neolithic man, or possibly woman. We don't know whether this was a man or a woman. It may have been a gender-neutral person. We don't know. But a person had an idea about making this. They found the stone. They then created this. So that's the gestation period. And then when it was finished, it was then used probably to skin a rabbit or something of that nature. This would be made to make things, to make a hide, to create clothes, perhaps cut things like for twine, to make more things like axes and spears. So it has a life. Then something happened to it. We don't know what. There's no evidence to suggest what happened to it, but it was dislocated from its owner or chain of owners, and it was left deposited in the earth for 30,000 years until I found it. And I went across a dangerous road in the middle of a rainstorm, and I crawled on my hands and knees, and I unearthed this. I then washed it off in the river, looked at it very carefully, threw away a number of other stones that were just ordinary stones. It's very difficult to be able to tell what one of these is. You'd have to study objects and material culture and be an archaeologist for a number of years in order to earn the right to have that skill. It's not just a lucky stone that I found. This is Neolithic artifact. So that's an example of the object life cycle. It has a birth, it has a life, and it has an afterlife. And I am very honoured and privileged to be a part of its afterlife. Then we have this one here. This is a microlith. This is especially beautiful. Now this one I just found on the same day, a little further down the road, about 200 yards, and this was just on the pavement. So this is what's called unprovenanced. This is probably from some scalpings, perhaps, that were dumped on somebody's backyard when they had the builders in. Now, as Adam Smith says in his Wealth of Nations, when it comes to quarries and stone, carrying charges are very, very expensive. So very often, most often, when you have building supplies like scalpings and flints, they come from the local area, because it's just simply not economical, or it's not worth it to transport large amounts of very heavy stone over long distances, because you lose more money than you would make, so there would be no money in selling the scalpings. So this is probably from Wiltshire. This again is a beautiful artifact. It's tiny, and it's in the shape of a wolf's head. You can't see it, but it's actually in the shape of a little wolf's head. Okay. And it's tiny, so because it's smaller, it's probably newer. Paleolithic and Mesolithic artifacts tend to be bigger. I've seen some bigger ones around here, and they're very nice. So anyway, when someone says they're a master of something because they've memorized a few words and they have other people telling them that they're a master, they're not a master. I hold a master's degree in archaeology and in classical studies, and I hold a BA in archaeology and in classical studies, and I've been a professional archaeologist for a number of years. So there are a lot of people talking about objects and material culture and Latin and trying to pretend to be this or that, and they style themselves as masters. But unless you've been officially conferred with the honours of a Magister Artium, you are not a master. Officially. You might call yourself one, and you might tell people, so just be careful. Just be very careful when someone lectures you about objects or material culture, and just check their credentials and see if they have any education or any work experience in this area. And if they have none, and they're trying to lecture you on objects, just bear in mind they don't even know the meaning of the word object, let alone any knowledge about objects themselves. So be careful. Just be careful. See you later.